Welcome back to the Messy Reformation. My name's Jason Ruis, and I'm the lead pastor at Faith Community CRC in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. My co-host is Willie Cronky. He's a member at Pease CRC in Pease, Minnesota. We're just a couple of guys who love the Christian Reformed Church and want to see Reformation happen in our denomination. But we realize that whenever Reformation happens in the history of the church, things get messy. And things continue to be messy in the Christian Reformed Church. So we're taking the opportunity to have conversations with pastors throughout the Christian Reformed Church to find out what's going on in our denomination, but also to talk about what Reformation might look like. It's also important for you to know that you are our marketing plan. We rely on you to spread the word about what we're doing at the Messy Reformation. We rely on you to share our content. And we rely on you to give us 5-star reviews and give good feedback for our podcast. You are the marketing plan. You can also support us financially on Patreon or Substack. All of the money raised is used to further the mission and the platform of the Messy Reformation. With all that said, we're going to get to this week's episode where I talk about the current state of the CRCNA and look forward to Synod 2025. Well, it's typical around this time of year for me to record some kind of a video talking about the classis meetings coming up. We have a lot of different classes that are going to be meeting for their winter meeting, passing overtures in preparation for Synod, electing delegates in preparation for Synod. And so we usually do some kind of a video to talk about what needs to happen in the CRC. And I may talk a little bit about that in this podcast, but really what I want to talk about is I want to give almost a state of the CRC address. And I realize I'm not really in a position to do that. I'm not the general secretary of the CRC. But really what I want to do is just from my point of view, give everybody an update on where I see our denomination at right now, especially in regards to things that, how the denomination's responding following Synod 2024. And that may help us think a little bit about what we need to be doing in preparation for Synod 2025. And so I just want to talk about, I'm in a unique position with this podcast. I'm interviewing people all around the CRC up in Canada and all across the United States. And so just because of that, I have a lot of connections throughout the denomination, and I get a feel for what's happening in various classes throughout the CRC. I'm also a stated clerk, and so I'm interacting with other stated clerks throughout the Christian Reformed Church. So I do feel like I have a pretty good understanding of what's going on in the Christian Reformed Church and kind of where we're at as a denomination. And, if there's anything I say here that people want to disagree with, go ahead and correct me and we can have a conversation. But I know that there's a lot of people who've been paying attention to what's been happening at these last few synods, and they're really interested in how churches are responding to the decisions of 2024, how classes are, and how our denominational leaders are as well. So I just wanted to give kind of my take on that and what I've been seeing happen. And so one of the first things I want to talk about is just how I see different churches and classes responding to the decisions of 2024. I've talked to a lot of stated clerks and a lot of classes and a lot of people in different classes. And from my kind of general take on that is it seems like there's really only a handful of classes that are really in turmoil over the decisions of Synod 2024. There's not as many as I actually even expected. There's a few that are, there's a lot of kind of conflict and division going on, or even a couple of classes that are really upset with the decisions. But really it's only a handful of classes. And on the other side of the spectrum, I've been really encouraged, actually, as I've talked to numerous people in all these different classes, there are numerous classes. Actually, there's a large number of classes who have said they're actually thankful for the decisions of Synod 2024. They're excited about the decisions even that have been made, and they're in full alignment with it. And they've actually had really no issues coming out of Synod 2024. And so I just think it's important for us to remember that there's a large group of classes, just like Classis Wisconsin. We've had really no big issues coming out of Synod 2024. Our churches are all in alignment and thankful for the decisions that have been happening. And so there are lots of other classes just like us in that realm. And then there's another pretty significant group of classes that it seems like they all have somewhere between 1 to 3 churches who are in the process of disaffiliation or talking about possibly disaffiliating. And so I don't have strong numbers on it. I just know as I talk to people, it seems like there's quite a few classes that have anywhere from 1 to 3. But I think one of the really important things about just getting that picture is there's not as many churches leaving as one would expect, which again really starts to come in line with the same numbers that we've been seeing for the last number of synods, this 75 to 25, and I keep saying it's probably even higher, 80 and 85% in alignment with the decisions that have been made at Synod. And there's just a really loud, vocal minority. And so we're seeing that play out now in the CRC where, 1 to 3 churches, I would guess we'll see anywhere around 30 maybe churches who are disaffiliating this year prior to Synod, and there may be a few more coming after that. But know that that's 30 churches out of 1,000 churches. And so we're talking like 3% of our churches disaffiliating. If it was 20%, right, that would be 200 churches disaffiliating. But from my understanding, from what I'm seeing, we're not seeing anything near that number of people, that number of churches seeking to disaffiliate from the CRC. And so on the one hand, I think that should encourage us that we are much more fully in alignment with the decisions than many people would have assumed, and I'd say be encouraged about the quite a few classes that are in alignment with the decisions and are excited about what's happening. And so what I'm noticing as I talk to people in all these different classes is that there's kind of a growing consensus that we've kind of crossed a threshold in the CRC, that we're moving beyond these issues of human sexuality, and now we can move on to some other bigger issues that really need to be talked about in the Christian Reformed Church. I also want to say, there's a lot of people wondering how our denominational staff are handling the decisions of Synod 2024. And there's a variety about that and there's some concern really about how our denominational staff have handled Synod 2022 and Synod 2023 a little bit, right? And many people were feeling like our denominational staff were kind of waffling on some of those decisions. They were trying to water them down, kind of soften them quite a bit. And I would say one of the really encouraging things that I have seen over the last few months is that I'm not actually feeling that way anymore as I begin to talk more and more to the various denominational leaders. What I'm seeing as I'm discussing with them, or even as I'm sitting on the sidelines watching denominational staff interact with people who are questioning the decisions of 2024, or even people who still continue, there's still a few people who continue to spout the conspiracy theory that Abide has kind of run this coup operation for the last 3 years of synods. But as people have tried to push some of those, what I've seen denominational leaders really actually lean into the decisions more from the last few years. They haven't tried to back away from it, tried to soften it. They've really kind of leaned into it and said, these are the decisions we've made as a denomination. This is who we are. And they haven't said it this bluntly, as I maybe would say it, but it has been more of a, here's who we are, take it or leave it. And I just want to say that that's really encouraging. I've seen that from numerous denominational leaders that I maybe didn't even expect to see it out of. And so that's encouraging. Now, I would say, I don't believe our denominational leaders are where we would want them right now. I don't think they're making the bold, courageous decisions and statements that I would like to see them making and helping to lead our denomination. But what I can say is that it's significantly better than it was last year and the year before that we're heading in the right direction. With that said, I do still feel like there's this interesting dynamic going on with denominational staff where they're still holding abide kind of at arm's length a little bit. They're kind of acting like abide is still the far right of the denomination, even though I would continue to tell us over and over again that abide isn't the far right of the denomination, that abide is at the center of the denomination. And people have just bought into some of these smear campaigns. But I still do feel like people kind of, even with me being, one of the hosts of the Messy Reformation and being on the Abide Steering Committee, I have some denominational staff kind of hold me at arm's length. And so, but I've also felt that lessening a little bit as well. So I'm not kind of pushed away as much. I'm kind of pulled in to have a conversation. And so I said, maybe they still don't know who I am. But I have felt like I've been able to have better conversations with our denominational staff. On that note, I was thinking about a conversation I had fairly recently, maybe a couple of months ago. I reached out to one of my buddies from seminary, someone we've talked quite a bit, we've hung out quite a bit, and I reached out to them just to check in and see how they were doing and to see how things in their classes are doing. And it was really interesting. As I interacted with him, he started off and just said, "Hey, I want you to know that I'm talking to you. I'm not talking to the Messy Reformation, and I'm not talking to Abide, because even though I have a lot of respect for you and who you are and what you stand for, I do not have respect for Abide. I think Abide has had a bad tone and a bad tenor, and there's been some bad things about that." And I didn't feel like getting into it at that moment, but I remember thinking, I am Abide. And so, like, if this person has respect for me and my stances and the way I interact, I am not like the mushy middle of Abide. In all reality, I'm probably more toward the far right of Abide. I don't know. And so it's just so interesting to me that people still have this idea that Abide is a bunch of just crabby jerks who are manipulating things. And so there's all this bad press out there. There's been some smear. There have been a couple of things that have happened that have been associated with Abide that I wouldn't appreciate either. And people have kind of held on to that. And so there's some of that out there still regarding Abide and probably people connected to the Messy Reformation a little bit. And so it's kind of weird to me to have that. And a couple of things on that. I think that's okay. People are never going to fully, like, there's a group of people, I would say, who are never going to fully understand who we are. They're going to refuse to believe that we are actually caring and loving people. And they're going to refuse to believe that because they believe that only a caring and loving person would hold to certain positions. And so I think, I've told people this before, I don't think we need to overly obsess on trying to run like a PR campaign to try to help with the image of Abide. I just think we need to learn to just be fine with being faithful and having people misrepresent us. And so I'm okay with that. I wasn't even offended by this buddy of mine who was talking about abide weirdly. I'm like, okay, I get that people have just misunderstood this, but know that I am a pretty good representation of everybody is involved with abide and who's walking in line with that. And so I guess on the one hand, I encourage us not to worry so much about all this PR stuff, not to worry about being slandered and all of that, but rather we should live in a way where those accusations just land flat. And that as people get to know us better, and hopefully as denominational staff get to know us better, that they begin to realize more and more that these accusations are completely false. And so I just encourage us to focus. Let's be much more focused on living faithfully and doing what God has called us to do than worrying about what some people who are really upset with us think about us. I want to say too, as far as denominational staff go, one of the things I think is going to be really important over this next year is that denominational staff need to really focus on restoring trust in the denomination. This is one of the things that has happened over and over and over again, where our denominational staff, because of how they've handled so many different things and because they have refused to act on certain things over the years, many people have lost trust in them. And even now, even though now I'm watching denominational staff make some really good decisions and lean into these decisions and kind of own this identity of who we are in the CRC, people still aren't trusting them. And so I would say, on the one hand, for denominational staff, I would encourage you, don't let that offend you. Just lean into it and start living and acting in a way that's going to build trust in the denomination. And, I've talked to a number of different denominational leaders over the years, and one person was telling me, well, we build trust by being in relationship with one another and getting to know one another. And on the one hand, that's true. We do. As we get to know, as denominational staff get to know me a little bit better, they begin to trust me more just because they understand who I am more fully. But I would also say that one aspect of building trust is making good decisions and showing that you want to lead the denomination in the direction that Synod has been taking us for the last few years. And I don't have the direct quote from some of this, but I've been thinking about this quite a bit lately, that there was a book that was really well known a while ago by Todd Bolsinger called Canoeing the Mountains. And he was talking about how to lead people into kind of new uncharted territories. And one of the things he said in that book that I thought was really important and a good reminder is that in order for your people to trust you enough to lead them kind of off the map into uncharted territories, you need to first prove to your people that you have the ability and the competency to lead them on the map, to just do the basic things. And once they trust you and they know that you can do the basic things of the job, you've earned trust with them, then they're willing to kind of lead, to follow you off into uncharted territories. And I really think, and I'm not actually wanting our denominational staff to lead us off into uncharted territories, but what I do think is that they need to focus really hard on leading in a way that shows us that they're competent to lead us on the map, to lead us in the direction that Synod has been telling us to. And as denominational staff begins to do that now and into the future, and the more they do that, and the more good decisions they make, and the more they communicate clearly and effectively, they will begin to rebuild trust from the rest of the denomination. And as they rebuild trust, we'll find this unity coming back in our denomination. And so I just want to say, for people at Calvin University and Calvin Seminary and the Office of the General Secretary, all of these different places, World Renew, Resonate, Reframe Media, Thrive, all these different organizations, if they want us to trust them, they need to start living and acting and serving in ways that rebuild that trust. And I just want to say one more thing that I do think is going to be really significant for the future of the CRC, and that's not just that our denominational staff and leaders start living and acting in ways that build trust. I think that's true, but I am so convinced that what they need to start doing is they can earn that trust back by hiring people that the denomination has already begun to trust, and allowing them to work in these denominational places and spaces. And again, I feel like there's still kind of people being pushed out. Anybody associated to Abide is kind of blacklisted from stepping into some of these denominational roles and stuff like that. And I would say one of the ways that they can earn the trust back of our denomination quickly is to hire some of these people that have already showed their competency in working with Abide and working at Synod, and hire some of the people that have earned the trust of the denomination and bringing them into that position. Then they already have people who the denomination trusts. And so I really think moving forward, we need to start thinking about what ways can we help our denomination rebuild trust in the leaders, like our COD as well. We need to rebuild trust there. One other thing has come up as I've reached out to different classes and as I've interacted with stated clerks. And this is something I really think we need to be talking about more. It's starting to be talked about a little bit more often now, but I shouldn't say every, that's an overstatement, but many of the classes that I talk to, the repeated refrain is that we have a lot of vacancies right now, and where our churches are having a hard time finding pastors. I hear it over and over and over again. And there are many classes that have like a 30% vacancy rate. There's some that have much lower than that, but I've talked to quite a few that a third of their churches are vacant right now. I know that, recently, Susan LeClaire put out a report talking about this, that right now we're currently at about, I think, 12 to 15% vacancy in our churches. And so, it's not as high as a third, but there's some classes that really have that. But even just from my own personal experience, as I'm talking to churches that are vacant, I'm telling them to expect a 3-year vacancy at this point, that they need to settle into that. And so that's quite a bit different than just 6-7 years ago, where they were telling people, expect a 1.5 year long vacancy. Now that's doubled because we have less pastors. And so I don't know the exact numbers of how many pastors we have, but I do know this: we're already really short on pastors. And the general feel I have as I look out across the denomination is that we have a lot of older pastors as well who are going to be retiring soon. And so if we have a pastoral shortage now, we're looking at a massive crisis coming in the next 5 years. And so I want to keep raising the flag on this, because I think it's something we need to start being active about. And I think anybody listening to this podcast can actually start doing some work to help bring this about. And thankfully, I know that the denomination is beginning to do some work, and I've had some good conversations with Susan LeClaire about what she's going to be doing to try to help with this. But one of the things we can do at a grassroots level, right? And this is going to be a repeated theme in what you keep hearing from us on the Messy Reformation, because really the work starts at the local church. We don't want our churches sitting back hoping the denomination is going to solve this problem for us. That we're not going to sit back and hope that the denomination is going to solve our pastoral shortage. We at the local church need to begin doing the work. And so that means we need to start raising up leaders. We need to start raising up people to start leading in our churches. We need to start encouraging young men to pursue pastoral ministry. And there's a lot of ways to do that, but I would say it just begins by working on faithful men in our churches to begin to serve our local church. And as they serve our local church, they get a taste, they get a flavor for what it means to be in ministry, and God often works in that by presenting a call to ministry. That's what happened to me. I got involved in helping develop the youth ministry at our church, and through that, God called me into long-term ministry. And so I would just encourage you to start looking around your church right now. Which young men are in your church who have this potential to maybe receive a call from God? Maybe God's given them giftedness in understanding His Word, giftedness in teaching, giftedness in discipling and caring for people. Anybody that kind of comes to your mind as I'm saying those things, I encourage you, write their name down, call them up, take them out for coffee, and start having a conversation with them about how they could use those gifts to help build up and strengthen the church. And so I really think that's like one massive thing we need to start doing in all of our churches. I also think that we need to focus heavily on recruiting solid young men from other faithful seminaries. Calvin seminaries we're starting to have, because of the results of the last few synods, I'm hearing that we're starting to have some more faithful men come into the seminary who are excited about what's going on in the CRC right now. But I also think we need to start doing some work with seminaries like Westminster and RTS and Covenant, and we need to be going to these seminaries and actively seeking to recruit young men to come into the CRC. And I think people sometimes forget that young men are excited to be part of something. They want to be part of a mission, and I would say they want to be part of Reformation. And so we can come into these seminaries, meet with some of these young men and say, hey, have you heard what's happening in the Christian Reformed Church right now? Have you seen the good work that's happening? Do you want to be part of something like this? Do you want to be involved in a denomination that's going through Reformation right now? Yes, it's going to be hard. Yes, it's going to be messy, but isn't that what you want? Don't you want to be part of something that's going to have an impact for the rest of history? Young men want that. And so I just want to encourage us to try to do that. I think if we were to start polling the different listeners of the Messy Reformation, I know we have strong connections down into Reformed Theological Seminary, and I know we have strong connections at Westminster, and we have strong connections at Calvin Seminary as well. I'm not sure if we have any strong connections at Covenant, but if we do, let me know. And I want to encourage you to start talking to these young men. And if you want to get me connected with people in these seminaries so that I can make this pitch, that's something I would love to do, because I really have a passion for bringing some solid young men into the CRC to help us continue to lead this Reformation. But I think this is a necessary step. I don't think we can start raising up grassroots leaders fast enough to be able to kind of divert this ledge we're going to in a pastoral shortage. I think we need to be more proactive. We need to start recruiting people from outside the CRC to come in and join us. And as we do that, again, we want to be recruiting people whose vision and theology aligns with who we are covenantally as a denomination. I want to throw one more thing out there that I think is interesting. I talked to someone from a classis. I'll leave it as vague as that there's conversations in the classis right now. There might even be an overture being written that would require every church in the classis to have at least one person who's licensed to exhort. Now, I don't know what that looks like in other classes. I know we have a pretty significant number of people with license to exhort in our area, but definitely not one per church. But I think it's something to consider, it's something to think about, because again, once you have people who have these gifts being raised up in your church, being intentional about finding people with these gifts and equipping people with these gifts, they start preaching in your church, they start preaching in the other churches, and on the one hand, it's going to help out with all of these vacant churches who are struggling to fill their pulpit with faithful, solid, Reformed teaching as they're waiting 3 years. But again, as people begin to do this work and as they begin to preach in other churches, I've seen it over and over again that people who are licensed to exhort, they start preaching in a vacant church over a period of time, and they fall in love with the people, and they see that they're gifted to be able to shepherd a flock, and now they feel a call to ministry, and sometimes they even end up being called to that church. And so, again, this is another way to do this grassroots movement in the CRC to address one of the big issues coming forward. I've got one more thing I want to talk about in regards to just denomination as a whole. And I know this isn't politically correct, but that's fine. But I continue to think we need to create the Department of Denominational Efficiency. I don't know if I want to spend a ton of time here, but I do think we know that we're already, struggling with ministry shares, and part of that's because churches have been withholding them because of the unfaithfulness of the denomination. And so as the denomination continues to be faithful, more ministry shares are going to flow. But we're also, if we lose 30 or eventually maybe 50, or let's say even on the high side, we lose 100 churches, that means our ministry shares are going to drop. And so we're going to have to make some decisions about what we're going to do as a denomination. We're going to have to focus on being more efficient in order to survive. And I know, I'm riffing off of this new Department of Government Efficiency, but I'm convinced that this is something we need to do if we're going to survive as a denomination. That we have to lean out the bureaucracy that's kind of grown up. It's just a natural thing that things grow and build and kind of become a behemoth, and you have a million different things going on. And in the life cycle of any business, actually, there comes a point where they have to cut lots and lots and lots of bureaucracy. And I think we're going to have to do that in order to kind of pull us out of the tailspin that we've been in, organizationally, and help us to kind of be a lean, mean fighting machine as a denomination. And one of the benefits of doing this is that it forces us to have some really hard conversations about who we are as a denomination and what should a denomination do. Like, how would you answer the question if you could only have one denominational agency? What would they be? And what would they do? If you could only have one. Initially, I'd said, what if you only had two? But just start thinking, if we could only have one denominational agency, what would they do? What would they be focused on? And how would they be serving the local church? And by trying to figure out the answer to that question, you have to ask some other questions, like, what's the priority of the Christian Reformed Church? What's our focus? And let me be clear, I'm not talking about consolidating 9 agencies into one like we did with Thrive, where we just took a bunch, put them all together. That's not actually consolidating. We're just moving things around and changing names there. I'm talking about we actually have to truly cut some things. Some things are going to have to go. And I realize that means jobs and families and people. I realize the difficulty of that. But I also believe very strongly that if we don't start making some of these cuts and we don't start cutting out the bureaucracy, that we will go belly up, that our denomination will eventually die. Because I look at the future of the church and the future of the church in the United States and Canada, and I think we cannot function as a bloated denomination. Churches are not going to continue to thrive if they have these bloated staff, and churches are going to have to learn how to be lean, mean, effective with the resources they have. And same with our denomination. We don't want to be spread out over 10, 15, 20 different things. We need to have a laser focus on what we're going to do, and that forces us to do that. And I think it again helps us, we fall into these traps of trying to do everything. And so that's why, over the years, the CRC has this agency, or office, because we're trying to do everything and we end up doing everything extremely poorly because we don't actually have the energy and the resources to do all of these things very well. Just imagine if we could pool all of our time and energy and resources in one direction and just go there, one strategic direction that we think is going to really, truly not only move the denomination toward health, but actually help push the kingdom of God further, help expand that here on earth, help build up the church. If we could do that, think of how amazing it would be to be a part of that. Think of how effective we could be. Instead of having all of our energy and resources kind of trickling off into all these tributaries off to the sides, we just have one river heading in one direction. That's all we have for this week. If you want to help us out and support the Messy Reformation, another thing you can do is sign up for our newsletter through Substack. That way you'll get episodes and summaries sent directly into your email inbox. It also gives us the ability to communicate with our audience, which is one of the biggest struggles of a podcast. So head over to the Messy Reformation on Substack and sign up for our newsletter. But until then, don't forget this is Christ's church, and he bought it with his blood. And we've been warned that wolves will come in trying to destroy the flock. So keep a close watch on your life and on your doctrine. Preach the word in season and out of season, and keep fighting the good fight in this messy Reformation.